Welcome to all of you. Welcome to worship at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene, whoever you are and wherever you are across this nation. We are glad you are with us for this time of worship, this time of gathering as a community and shaping what is of worth and meaning. Here may you find a lightness of being, a lifting up of the spirit. Here may you find a space to lay down the things that weigh heavy on your heart and soul. Here may you be challenged. Here may you be comforted. Here may you be offered compassion. Welcome.
Now is the time in our service that we light our chalice, representing the light of reason, the warmth of community, and the flame of hope. If you have a chalice at home, have it close by and ready. If you do not, you can use your hands to create a virtual chalice like this. We light this flame with both seriousness and playfulness, because life in the time of COVID requires both. And we are a responsive people, ready to light the flame for what is needed. And today, this morning, we light this flame to ignite the spirit of play. Let us prepare ourselves for whatever this day and the days to come may bring. Let us find a way to infuse each day with some act of acknowledgement for the pain in the world and with some playfulness and laughter, with some gratitude, some thanksgiving, some kindness. Let us till a place within, fertile ground, readied, awakening, growing, providing sustenance and nurture, each an offering, each a tiny stitch in repairing the torn fabric of human wholeness. Come into this time with no expectation. Come into this time simply present. Take from it what you will, and let it carry you into the days to come.
Good morning, all. It's my turn to tell the story. And this story is unfortunately true. I shared it with the children as well. When I was a junior in college, I got interested in going to the Iona community, which is an island in what's known as the Inner Hebrides off the coast of Scotland. And I was living on the Isle of Mull in what's called a camp. And this camp was very, very rustic. And once a week, we would walk down to the ferry, and I think it was a mile across. We would take the ferry from Finnefort over to the island of Iona, and we would attend worship, and we would walk around the island, which is only 5 miles. It's really rich with history. There's 60 kings that are buried there, all kinds of stuff. It's a magical, magical place to visit. But the thing was, at age 21, I had about enough of all the spiritual stuff. When I went there, they said, well, you're having worship twice a day. Okay, fine. And then it was like, you're going to lead worship. Oh, okay, fine. And I thought we needed a little levity. So there was a song that I remembered, and some of you might know it. I think it's in Canadian origins. It's about an elephant. It goes, one elephant went out to play on a spider's web one day. They had such enormous fun that they called for another elephant to come. And the version I learned, there's no limit to how many elephants came to play. I think in the song that I found online, there's only 5. But what you do is you stand up and you use one of your hands as a trunk. And so what happens is the elephant called for that other one to come play, and then all of a sudden you have two, and the elephant reaches their hand down between their legs and grasps the hand of the other elephant, and you form this long line. And as you're going around, you kind of hop. So you one elephant hop, went out to play, hop on a spider's web one day, hop. She had such enormous fun that she called for another elephant to come. So it's kind of a fun song. And I decided, okay, we need to do this all through the grounds, all through the rectory, all through the areas where everybody was being quiet and reading, and back out again. I just thought we needed to have some fun, to play just a bit to temper this deep spiritual life. I'm not sure that the Iona community will ever forget that song, or perhaps the brash young woman that brought that to them, who was there for 5 weeks visiting from America. But I really do believe, just like with joy and sorrow, that playfulness and seriousness live right next door to each other, especially in these times. We need to access that playfulness within, find a way for laughter and humor and joy and a lightness of being, because if we only focus on what is wrong, what is broken, and only the suffering, and don't acknowledge that there's all this other part as well, we're going to sink. So this is not to dismiss the weight of the world, but to invite us to be able to enter into it, acknowledging that will lift our spirits and buoy us and allow us to carry on, is play. Thank you.
There are a lot of wise people that have had wonderful things to say about this concept of play. In 1907, this man named Richard Lingard wrote a little 65-page book called A Letter of Advice to a Young Gentleman Leaving the University Concerning His Behavior and Conversation in the World. So the title of the book is actually longer than the reading, which goes like this, quote, "You can discover more about a person in an hour of play than in a year of conversation." And the very serious Ralph Waldo Emerson had this to say, "It is a happy talent to know how to play." James P. Carse, who wrote this wonderful book called Finite and Infinite Games, A Vision of Life as Play and Possibility, he says this very wise thing: a finite game is played for the purpose of winning, an infinite game for the purpose of continuing the play. And finally, a quote from Tom Robbins, who wrote two of my favorite books, Jitterbug Perfume and Another Roadside Attraction. He has this to say: humanity has advanced when it has advanced, not because it's been sober and responsible and cautious, but because it's been playful, rebellious, and immature.
Thank you, Jean, for those readings. One of the congregations that I served, I told folks, excuse me, that I thought we needed an adult play group. And then I realized just how that sounded. So trust me when I tell you that what I meant and how it could be interpreted are two very different things. I was thinking about a congregant who had shared what the rhythm of his life was like. On weekdays, wake up, walk large, uncontrollable rescued dog, eat, get in car, commute anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half in traffic, work all day, do the commute in reverse, walk said large, uncontrollable dog, eat dinner with wife, maybe watch a bit of TV, most nights falling asleep in a chair. Saturday, recover. Sunday, church, and chores. Repeat. Week after week, year after year. I could not imagine such a life until my own began to mimic his in a much less extreme version. He eventually had a stroke, and then 2 more when he was hospitalized, and he survived. He lives a quiet life now, a compromised, quiet life. He needed an adult play group. There's a story that circulates around the Bozeman congregation about me and dominoes. Not the dominoes that involves multiples of 5 and counting, where you have to actually use your brain, but the game where you match like-colored or numbered dot tiles to form trains. Apparently, an entirely different person emerges who not only talks trash, praises God, but winds up and carries on like a New York radio baseball announcer. It's more really letting loose than it is competitive, though I have been a lifelong competitor. Most folks are not prepared for this person. It's my form of adult play. On a raft trip down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon, I earned the nickname Bail Bucket Bad Girl because to me, a bail bucket has 2 purposes. Of course, to bail water out of a boat if it's not self-bailing when it's necessary, but more importantly, bail buckets are to start water fights and to keep at it until everyone is thoroughly soaked. Adult play. Annoying, perhaps. I don't know about most of you, but the oh-so-perfect suburban 1950s was a time when we kids ran free all over the neighborhood. I spent hours with a neighbor boy or two across the street at the college that had a tennis court. We never, ever played tennis. We had a big kickball, and we made up a game on the spot using only the kickball and the court. You got so many points for kicking it and landing this place and that place. The rules changed, the game changed, it went on and on. But every day we were outside, all day, except for when we were called in for lunch or dinner. Our lives were play because it was the oh so perfect 1950s suburbia. We were safe. I became a jock. Not an athlete. An athlete's someone who's in shape. I became a jock, competitor, and I competed on 3 teams a year from high school through college. It was a more prescriptive form of play. The games and the rules were already made up. But playing organized sports gave me discipline, place, teamwork, and a sense of belonging. Though I played racquetball as an individual sport, I never have liked individual sports because in team sports, you learn to depend on your teammates and to let them depend on you. And you create this kind of energy that lifts you up when you think, I'm too tired to make this happen. We really relied on each other for skill and for encouragement. And I learned a lot about the give and take, about working together as opposed to wanting to be a star for a team to be successful. And that carries over into my work life as well. I much prefer the group communal creative process to that of creating in my own personal vacuum. Those who work with children will tell you just how important a role that play has in their development. Not just things like fine motor skills, but it is itself a learning ground for negotiation and creativity and imagining, for cooperation, and for that skill that we all need to learn, conflict resolution. That early play is a time when our bodily energy meets our exploratory brains. Play builds or destroys our early friendships. It's where we practice relationships. And the loss of play as we become adults seems to parallel a loss of innocence. There was an article I read several weeks ago, and an author said that this is before we even were debating really if schools should reopen. It was the assumption that they would. When the schools reopen during this time of COVID, this is what supposedly should happen. And I quote, "A 90-day golden age of play, school re-entry period, would help ease children back into the school setting while providing physical and creative outlets to let them learn to calm their stress and thrive with their peers and teachers." But what exactly would this program look like? It should look like a child's dreams, a time of joy, movement, discovery, and experimentation without fear of failure. A time when every student should enjoy comfort, safety, and socialization with peers and warm, caring adults. I so wish this would happen if and when we return to school in person. I also wish it would happen for adults in their work settings. You know, Google got it right when they put things in their buildings like climbing walls and foosball tables and ping pong tables in their office spaces. I've been astounded by watching how my great nephews and nieces, quote, play. Most of the play that I have experienced them doing is at places like jump houses and trampoline parks. Or if it is at home, it's inside with all sorts of toys that are way too complicated for me. Gone are the days of pickup sticks and Lincoln logs. You can still get them, but watch how they sit in their boxes and are overlooked for the battery-dependent or computer-generated games. There are entire languages created around these games that are incomprehensible to me. I mean, I'm willing at some point to watch Game of Thrones like for a month straight so I can keep up culturally, but I draw the line at electronic games. I used to travel with youth groups a lot, and I had a rule, which was no walk persons or any other electronic devices. Yes, I know this dates me. Nobody even knows what a walk person is anymore. But why did I ban those? Because they interfered with the purpose of the trip, which was to interact with one another and learn from one another and build community, as well as to enter fully into the cultural experience we were immersed in. There were no cell phones then, there were no iPads or tablets. Hell, there weren't even computers for most of us at that time. It gave me great pleasure to overhear veteran youth group members explain to new members of the group why there were no devices. And instead, they had Uno and Skip-Rope, card games that large groups of them would play. They also played I Doubt It, which they called by another name with great enunciation. I am told that one Uno game lasted an hour and a half one night because they goaded each other on, they openly cheated to allow the game to continue, and they would pass cards never mind, you know what I'm trying to say, to one another. And they talked with one another, and they laughed. Once in Mexico with the youth, and again in Ecuador with them, I watched the language and cultural barriers melt away, all because of two balls. In Mexico, someone had an underinflated soccer ball, and suddenly a game between Estados Unidos and Mexico began, and all genders joined in. Dust flew everywhere, as did the sweat. No team won, but they all played. In Ecuador, I found myself outside a home surrounded by a group of children, me speaking basically only food words in Spanish, and them no English. There was a tennis ball there. Again, it had lost its bounce, but I picked it up and I did my best to try and bounce it to each child, who then got the idea that they were supposed to bounce it back to me, and they came alive. We laughed and we groaned when someone missed. They clapped for folks who, quote, did it right. So never undervalue or underestimate play. One of the all-church events I came up with for a congregation I served was high tea and croquet. The bottom line was that everyone had to wear white, but they couldn't buy anything new. They could only wear thrift store quality. No spending a ton of money. One year I wore a sheet to take on the toga look. The Women's Fellowship brought out their silver tea set. Several croquet courses were set up on the sprawling church lawn. All ages were invited to participate. We ate scones and crumpets and watercress and cucumber sandwiches. There were hats. There was a man who wore his navy whites, which still fit him. There were parasols and gloves. But most of all, there was play and fun and community. The event became an auction item that I would donate at the next congregation I served. I can make some tasty tea-appropriate sandwiches. Years ago, I remember there was some kind of movement that was short-lived to talk about humor in the Bible. Now, I've read the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, actually some of those parts quite a bit. And I've laughed at some stories from the Hebrew Bible, but I have found absolutely nothing humorous or playful or light about Jesus, his teachings, or the stories told about him. Anger, yeah, I've seen displays of anger. Suffering, yes. Compassion, healing, and love, that defines who Jesus was. But humor, a playfulness, a lightness of being, I just cannot even imagine if there was such a person, Jesus playing. I'm not having it. Play in Western religion? Really? But then I remembered being in Bhutan, which is a Buddhist country and has many, many religious festivals that go on for days. And there are these dances with amazing costumes and masks. And each dance relates a religious story. There's a master of ceremonies, if you will, that is part clown and part enforcer. He brings out laughter with the outrageous, sometimes mocking acts, and he literally cracks a whip, which he carries. He loves to crack that whip. And so one is both drawn to and repelled by that particular character. But there's an ancient and long tradition of these sacred clowns who bring both severity and playfulness to religious ritual. The Encyclopedia Britannica, also a relic of those oh-so-perfect suburban 1950s, defines a sacred clown this way. A ritual or ceremonial figure in various pre-literate and ancient cultures throughout the world who represents a reversal of the normal order, an opening to the chaos that preceded creation. The reversal of normality that is the distinguishing mark of the clown relates them to the powerful world that existed before the present one. In certain traditions, clowning is apotropaic, which means averting evil. That kind of a ritual, a way of deflecting demonic attention away from serious religious activities. In other contexts, the clown serves as an initiatory person who torments and teases the initiate, who must persevere through those jests and the insults hurled at them. These sacred clowns figure in every culture around the globe. They can be like the man in Bhutan, flesh and blood, or they can be like the coyote in Native American stories. A Salish man spoke about the role of the sacred clown this way. He said, in the days before the invaders came, we had clowns. Not clowns like you see now with round red noses and baggy costumes, our clowns wore all kinds of stuff. Anything they felt like, they wore. And they didn't just come out every once in a while to act silly and make people laugh. Our clowns were with us all the time, as important to the village as the chief or the shaman or the dancers or the poets. In her article, Path of the Sacred Clown, Peggy Andrea sums up the role of the sacred clown. Coyote, Nasrudin, St. Francis and his order of Jesters of the Lord. I gotta tell you, I tried to track that down and find out more. I got only so far. I would love if somebody else could go on a little hunt to tell me more about St. Francis and his orders of the Jesters of the Lord. Zen masters, Taoist sages, Hasidic storytellers, clowns and performance artists, such prophets encourage us not to take ourselves too seriously. They say that what we know is often not worth knowing, and that what's worth knowing cannot be known through our ways. To our sensible selves, their actions seem silly, shameless, maybe even shocking, but they have an important role in the spiritual life. They carry the banner for the spiritual practice of play. She goes on to say that play is the exuberant expression of our being. It is at the heart of our creativity, our sexuality, and our most carefree moments of devotion. It helps us live with absurdity, paradox, and mystery. It feeds our joy and wonder. It keeps our search for meaning down to earth. Play is not the opposite of the sacred. It is what can reveal the sacred. That great Unitarian Universalist bard, Robert Fulghum, wrote that play is not only recreation, but in a finer sense of the world, it's a matter of creation and recreation. It's also generative, able to break through stuck places or awkward moments. Jung wrote that the creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct, acting from inner necessity. Without this playing with fantasy, no creative work has ever yet come to birth. The debt we owe to the play of the imagination is incalculable. I believe that humor is a necessary part of worship. All work and no humor makes our religious lives way too serious. Play and playfulness can allow us to access the sacred just as well as chant and readings and music and sermons. The best-selling author, sociologist, and life coach, Martha Beck, coined the term sacred play. She says that sacred play is anything that takes your right hemisphere of your brain, takes you into your right hemisphere of your brain. It turns out that this move away from the left to the right hemisphere allows us to enter into a sense of expansiveness, and that everything can be accomplished through unusual rhythmic action or any action that requires so much attention away from words that you cannot think in words. So sacred play can take the form of storytelling or dance or making art or music. And I've come to believe that ritual is itself a form of play. It's the thing that takes us out of the ordinary, or any of the things that can take us out of the ordinary and carry within them the possibility of encountering something outside of the self. So I can see that if there is not outright play in the practice of religion, there is at least the element of playfulness. I still think we need adult play groups, not just board or card games, but water fights with balloons, games of Uno, sticker books and dot-to-dots and jigsaw puzzles, games that are cooperative or competitive, solo or group. splashing in puddles, getting down and dirty in the soil, making mud pies, running or moving through sprinklers, building castles out of buckets and sand on the beach, charades, badminton, having carving contests using jicama, ugliest cookie contests, making houses of cards, marbles, Jenga, Nerf basketball or hockey. And here's the thing, laughter follows play. So do tears, but often it is laughter that follows play. And tears can follow laughter. Sometimes when you laugh so hard, you end up crying, kind of like our sorrow and our joy living right next to one another. All of that's a kind of access to something deeper, to something more. I think play is a form of resilience and resistance in this time. Resilience is something we are in need of, and we need to cultivate it right now, in the midst of COVID, in the midst of global economic uncertainty, in the midst of political uncertainty. And yes, someone typed in, can we play jacks too? And the answer is, of course. I'm not naive enough to think that we can play or laugh our way out of what we are facing, the seriousness of everything that we are facing. But I do think that we're not going to make it through it without play or playfulness. Our hearts need a lightness of being. They need release, the kind of release of pent-up emotion and energy that play allows. Think of it as a kind of spiritual valve on the pressure cooker of crisis. Water fight, anyone? This is the time in our gathering as a community where we lay before one another the joys and sorrows of our hearts. I would invite you now, as Suzanne plays music for us, to type into the chat the joys and sorrows of your lives. Once again, thanks to Suzanne for the music that she plays. So many people are loving the music. Never be fooled and think that music is just filler. We have so many celebrations. A lot of them revolve around Frankie and Jean Marie's wedding yesterday. Another celebration is that Jones won their case and for the right to be listed as gender non-binary. Please correct me if I got the actual language wrong. For weddings, for being able to be connected to church by computer, which is more than some folks can do when it's an in-person service. The opportunity for tea time with the granddaughter, for sobriety, for the puppies, for the rescue dogs, for a visit with daughters, for water blasters that are going to emerge from the storage shed, for the opportunity perhaps to have an improv group when we gather again, joy for a grandson, disappointment that rugs have to be rolled up and put away because the person can't care for themselves. Thanksgiving for a barbecue and a game of Scrabble with neighbors. Also for a 4-year-old who has created a play area between 2 yards. For 53 years together in partnership, and a trip to the coast tomorrow for another who is sharing their anniversary. For the friend with COVID, for the swallows, for the hummingbirds, for the sprinklers at Alton Baker Park that somebody got doused by unexpectedly and still managed to laugh at, for pelicans, for berries, for a writing group that celebrated with flowers and food, concern for someone struggling with finding meaning in life, prayers for someone facing surgery, somebody else receiving a medical procedure, celebrating 2 young, or maybe they're old, I don't know, folks who are in love. The ability to find on YouTube dance videos that people can participate in, for dreams of dancing again, concern and sadness because of the violence that has been shown against protesters in Portland. And somebody else is saying happy that they get to have a knee replacement soon. May we hold all of these concerns that have been lifted up and the ones that remain in our hearts in this chalice of community until we meet again. May it be so.
It is now that time in the service where we give an offering. We give not because we must, but because we may. To give is always an opportunity, a way to acknowledge that this community is my community, which has need of me and I of it. Please give in support of the work and the ministry of this congregation. May these offerings of the labor of our lives and our love be transformed, that others' lives may be transformed. Thank you.
If you have your chalice at home where you can put your hands together for our chalice extinguishing, it's from Winnie the Pooh and it's from Tigger. And Tigger says, honey, oh boy, honey, that's what Tiggers like best. And then Tigger actually tastes the honey. Yuck! Tiggers don't like honey. That icky, sticky stuff is only for heffalumps and woozles. Well, says Tigger, I better be bouncing along now. Chum, cheerio, ho, ho, ho. Well, I gotta go now. I got a lot of bouncing to do. Hoo, 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 hoo. TT friend FN. Ta-ta for now. Amen.